The city was busy, loud, and always moving. But somewhere inside this fast world lived a woman who had learned how to stay calm even in storms. Her name was Marcia Lewis, a black woman who carried strength in her eyes and patience in her voice. Most people did not know her story. They did not know how many years she had spent fighting for respect, for justice, and for a place where she truly belonged from a young age. Marcia believed in rules, fairness, and doing the right thing. She never wanted fame. She never wanted power. She only wanted to serve. When she was a child, she watched her neighborhood struggle with crime and fear. She saw people scared to walk outside at night. She saw families losing hope. And she promised herself one thing. One day, I will protect these people. Promise became her journey. When she was old enough, she joined the police academy. It was not easy for her. Many people doubted her because she was a woman. Even more doubted her because she was black. Some officers spoke to her like she did not belong there. Some instructors tried to make training harder for her. But Marcia never broke. Every insult made her stronger. Every challenge made her better. She worked twice as hard, learned twice as fast, and trained twice as long as anyone else. Slowly, people started to notice. She was not just a good officer. She was one of the best. Years passed, and Marcia built a reputation. She did her job with honesty, with heart, and with courage. She never spoke loudly, but whenever she entered a room, people listened. She solved cases others gave up on. She talked to victims with kindness. She handled criminals with firmness, but fairness. She became the kind of officer the community trusted, and the kind of woman young girls looked up to. But even with all her success, she had to deal with discrimination again and again. Some officers whispered behind her back. Some refused to take orders from her. Some acted like she could never reach high positions because she was not their kind. But Marcia did not fight them. She just worked harder. The department needed a new chief, someone who could lead with strength but also with heart. Someone who could fix the broken trust between police and the community. Someone who understood what fairness truly meant. And after months of discussion, the city leaders chose one name, Marcia Lewis. She was the first black woman ever to be offered that position. It was history. It was a moment the city would never forget. But Marcia did not celebrate loudly. She did not post it online. She did not tell the world. She only told her mother. Her mother cried with pride and said, "You earned this, baby. Every struggle brought you here." Marcia smiled but felt the weight of responsibility. She wanted to start her new role the right way. No drama, no attention, no special treatment. She wanted the officers to see her work before they saw her title. That is why she kept her promotion private until her first official meeting at the station. On the morning of the incident, she woke up early. She looked at her uniform hanging neatly. She touched the badge, the same badge she had worn for years. But today, it felt different. It felt heavier. It felt like a new chapter was beginning. She whispered to herself, "Today, I lead." She left her house with calm confidence. The sun had just started rising. The streets were quiet, and Marcia believed it was going to be a peaceful day. But fate had other plans. She did not know that in just a short few hours, she would face something she'd never expected. She did not know that officers would treat her like a criminal. She did not know she would be pushed, grabbed, and assaulted, and she definitely did not know that the world would watch her stand back up and call herself the new chief. Part 1 ends here. The calm before the storm. The evening sky was turning dark when Marcia drove through the quiet side of the city. Streetlights were slowly waking up, and the roads were almost empty. She liked this time of day. No traffic. No noise. Just her thoughts and the soft hum of her car engine. Today was supposed to be simple. She was going to meet the department leaders for her first briefing as the new chief. But she was early. Nearly 30 minutes early, so she decided to stop for a moment on a calm street near the station. She pulled her car to the side, turned on her hazard lights, and leaned back to check her notes. The street was peaceful. A dog barked far away. A couple walked past quietly. Everything looked normal, but normal was about to disappear. As Marcia was reading, She saw flashing blue lights in her rearview mirror. A patrol car had pulled up behind her. She didn't move. She didn't panic. She just wondered why they were stopping. Maybe they thought her car was broken? Maybe they just wanted to check if she was safe? She expected a polite, simple conversation. But the moment the two officers stepped out, she felt something was wrong. They moved fast. Too fast. Their hands were already on their belts. Their voices were sharp, not friendly. "Step out of the vehicle." "Now," one officer shouted. Marcia blinked. She was confused. She looked around. No one else was there. They were talking to her. She rolled down the window slowly and said calmly, "Officer, is there a problem?" "Yes," the second officer snapped. "You're parked suspiciously." "Step out, ma'am." Immediately. Suspiciously. She was sitting in her own car, hazard lights on. It made no sense. She tried to stay polite. "I'm an officer too," she said softly. "Please allow me to." "We don't care," the first officer interrupted. "Step out now." Their tone was aggressive. Their faces were tight with irritation. They were not listening. They were not thinking. They were assuming Marcia knew this behavior. She had seen it happen to others, officers jumping to conclusions without checking facts. But she never imagined she would be on the receiving end. Still, she didn't argue. She opened her door slowly and stepped out with calm. Steady movements. The officers came closer, surrounding her like she was a threat. "Why are you here? What are you hiding? Show your hands properly." Their questions flew like arrows, fast and hostile. Marcia tried to explain. "I stopped to check directions," she said. "I work at the department." "If you check my butt once again," she was cut off. "Don't play smart," the taller officer barked. "We've seen this trick before." "A trick?" She felt her stomach tighten. They weren't just suspicious. They were convinced she was a criminal. One officer leaned forward, shouting inches from her face. His breath was hot, his anger obvious. "Do you have weapons?" "Drugs. What's in your car?" Marcia held her calm, though her heart was beating faster now. "Please," she said, "just check my ID." But they didn't want to hear anything. Suddenly, one officer grabbed her arm roughly. The other ordered her to turn around. The street that was peaceful moments ago now felt dangerous. A couple walking earlier had stopped watching the scene. A man across the street took out his phone to record. Even with people watching, the officers didn't slow down. "Stop resisting," one yelled, even though Marcia was not resisting at all. "I'm not resisting," she said, breathing deeply. "Please, check my ID." But the officers did not. Her calm voice seemed to make them angrier. Maybe they thought she was too confident. Maybe they assumed she was hiding something. Or maybe they simply saw her as someone who didn't deserve respect. One officer pushed her against the car. Hard. The sound echoed in the quiet street. A small gasp came from the crowd. Someone whispered, "Why are they doing this?" She didn't do anything. But the officers didn't stop in Marcia's mind. One thought repeated, "This is getting out of control." The night that started peaceful had turned into a storm, and the real storm had just begun. The wall of silence around the street broke the moment the officers pushed Marcia harder. The quiet evening had turned into a stage, and every second felt heavier than the last. People stood frozen, unsure if they should interfere or stay silent. Every pair of eyes could see that Marcia wasn't resisting. But the officers acted as if she was a danger. The taller officer held her arms behind her back with unnecessary force. His fingers dug into her skin like metal claws. The second officer searched her pockets without a word of permission. Marcia could hear her own breathing, slow, controlled, trying not to show pain. Inside her mind, she kept reminding herself, "Stay calm. Don't react. Don't give them a reason." But the officers were determined to create a reason on their own. "Spread your legs," the taller officer barked. "Look straight ahead." She followed every instruction, even when each movement made her shoulders ache. She had trained officers before. She knew protocol. She knew how a stop should be done. What these men were doing was not protocol. It was aggression mixed with disrespect. A woman from the small crowd stepped forward slightly and asked, "Why are you doing this?" "She isn't fighting you." One officer turned toward her and yelled, "Back off! This is police business." The woman flinched and stepped back. The crowd grew quiet again. Marcia's heart sank at the silence. Silence could be dangerous. Silence meant no one wanted trouble. Silence meant the officers felt free to continue. Suddenly, the shorter officer grabbed her by the shoulder and twisted it. Pain shot through Marcia's arm, sharp and hot. "Stop resisting." He shouted again. "I'm not resisting," she said, her voice calm but strained. The officer didn't listen. He pushed her down toward the hood of her car. Her forehead almost hit the metal. People gasped. A phone dropped. Someone whispered, "This is wrong. So wrong." But the officers didn't stop. The taller officer leaned close to her ear and said, "You think you're clever? You think you can fool us? Not tonight? Fool them?" She wasn't even speaking. She wasn't moving. She wasn't resisting. "Please," she said again, "check my identification. It will explain everything." The officer shook his head like he didn't even hear her. Or maybe he didn't want to hear her. The shorter officer searched her bag on the hood of the car but didn't bother to open her wallet. Her ID was right there. He simply didn't care. "I don't see anything suspicious," he said. "That means she hid it," the taller officer replied. "Search her car." Before Marcia could say a word, they pulled her away from the vehicle and pushed her toward the side. Her legs hit the curb. She stumbled but didn't fall. Their hands were all over her, grabbing, pulling, dragging. Her calm was slipping. Not because of fear, but because of anger. Years of training, years of discipline, years of service, everything was crashing against the reality in front of her. This wasn't a mistake. This was prejudice. This was bias. This was power being abused openly in the night, and she had no badge visible to prove otherwise. A man from the crowd shouted, "Watch." She said, "Check her ID. Just check it." But the officers ignored him. The taller officer suddenly pulled her arm upward, twisting it painfully behind her back. Marcia cried out silently, her face tightening. Still, she spoke in a calm tone. "I am cooperating. Please stop hurting me." But they pushed her again, forcing her to the ground this time. Knees pressed into her back. Hands held her down. Gravel scraped her skin. Her breath came out rough against the pavement. Cameras from the crowd shook as people recorded every second. They knew this was wrong. They knew this was dangerous. But they also knew that video was the only protection she had now. The shorter officer leaned over her and shouted, Tell us the truth. Who are you?" Marcia felt the last bit of calm slipping away. They wanted the truth, but they refused to look at it. Her truth sat inside her wallet, untouched. She inhaled slowly and said, "One more time, if you check my ID, you will understand." But they didn't. Instead, they tightened their grip. The assault wasn't just physical, it was humiliation, disrespect, and blind judgment. And as she lay there on the cold ground, Marcia realized something. They had no idea who they were touching. No idea what storm was coming for them. Part 3 ends here. The moment before the twist begins. The world around Marcia felt heavy as she lay on the cold ground, her cheek pressed against the rough pavement. The officers' hands were still holding her down, their voices sharp and full of authority they did not deserve. The crowd watched in fear, anger, and disbelief. They had seen many things, but tonight felt different, like something big was about to happen. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the taller officer released a little pressure from her back. "Stand up," he ordered. Marcia tried to rise, but her arm hurt from being twisted so hard. She pushed herself up slowly, brushing the dirt from her uniform. Her breath was steady, but inside, something powerful was building, something the officers had no idea they were waking. The shorter officer stepped closer, his face red with anger. "You better start talking," he said. "Who are you? What are you hiding?" Marcia lifted her head, her eyes calm but sharp. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She simply said with a quiet firmness, "Check my ID. I told you many times." Her voice was steady, controlled, too controlled, and that bothered the officers. People who were guilty usually panicked. They cried, they yelled, but she stood like someone who knew she had nothing to fear. The taller officer rolled his eyes. "Fine. Let's see who you really are." He grabbed her bag from the hood of the car and flipped it open impatiently. The wallet was right on top. He pulled out the ID card and held it under the stred. The crowd leaned in. The shorter officer stepped closer. Marcia stayed silent. The taller officer's eyes scanned the ID. At first, nothing changed in his expression. Then something shifted. His eyebrows lowered. His lips parted slightly. His face began to lose color. He read the name again, then again. Finally, he whispered, This can't be right." The shorter officer looked confused. "What's wrong?" The taller officer handed him the ID with a shaky hand. "See for yourself." The shorter officer read it. His jaw dropped. There, in bold letters, was her name, Marcia Lewis, and beneath it, her new title, Chief of Police. For a moment, the street fell completely silent. It was as if the world itself stopped to breathe. The shorter officer looked up at Marcia, his mouth open, his voice stuck. You're the new chief." Marcia lifted her chin. Her voice was calm, but now it carried the full weight of her authority. "Yes, I am the new chief of this department." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman covered her mouth. A man whispered, "Oh my God." The two officers stood frozen like statues. Their faces were a mix of fear, regret, and shock. Everything they had just done, every push, every shout, every unnecessary force replayed in their minds. Now in a painful new light, the taller officer stepped back, stumbling slightly. "Chief, we didn't know." Marcia held up a hand. "Stop." Her voice was soft but powerful. The kind of voice that made people listen. "You didn't check my ID," she said. "You didn't ask questions? You didn't follow protocol?" The officer stared at the ground. They had no excuse. They knew it. "You judged me before you even spoke to me," she continued. "You treated me like a criminal without reason." So the crowd could hear too. This is exactly the behavior that destroys trust between the police and the community. The shorter officer swallowed hard. "Chief, please." "We're sorry," she said. "Does not erase what happened." Her words cut clean, sharp, and fair the way justice should be. The taller officer tried to speak, but nothing came out. He simply lowered his head. Marcia looked at both officers with steady eyes. "You made a choice tonight, and now there will be consequences." The crowd murmured. They could feel the shift. The fear that once filled the air was gone. Now, something else was rising, respect. Not from the officers, but from the people watching. One woman whispered, and still stayed calm. "That's real strength." Marcia turned and walked toward her car with a dignity that the officers could never take away. Every step she took was a reminder of who she truly was. The officers had tried to break her, but instead, she revealed a power greater than they ever imagined. The moment Marcia said, "There will be consequences," the energy of the entire street changed. The officers who just minutes ago stood tall and aggressive were now silent, small, and unsteady. They didn't know what to do with their hands. They didn't know where to look. Their confidence had vanished like smoke in the wind, but Marcia didn't stay to watch their confusion. She simply walked toward her car with steady steps. The crowd parted for her as if she were a queen returning to her throne. People whispered, "That's the new chief." She didn't even raise her voice. She stayed strong through all of that. Some had tears in their eyes. Some were filled with anger for her. But every single person felt respect. Marcia opened her car door slowly. Her arm still hurt. Her shoulder burned. Her pride had taken hits, but her dignity remained untouched. She sat in the driver's seat and took one long breath, letting the night air fill her lungs. Before she could start the engine, she heard footsteps approaching. It was the taller officer. "Please," he said softly. his voice shaking. "We didn't know. If we had known," she looked at him through the open window and said, "You should treat every person with respect, whether you know them or not." Her words hit him harder than any punishment could. He nodded silently. Unable to speak, when Marcia finally drove away, the crowd broke into quiet applause. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was slow, heartfelt, and full of meaning. They were not clapping because she was chief. They were clapping because she represented something more: courage without violence, strength without anger, leadership without ego. At the police station, news travels fast in a city. But some news travels like lightning. By the time Marcia reached the station, the incident footage had already spread. Officers were gathered in small groups, whispering, phones in their hands, eyes wide with shock. Is that really her? How could they treat the new chief like that? This is going to explode. Inside the main lobby, the deputy commissioner stood waiting. His face was tense, his jaw tight. When he saw Marcia walking in, he hurried toward her. "Chief Lewis," said, guilt heavy in his tone. "We heard what happened. We are deeply—" Marcia raised a hand gently. "No speeches. I just want facts. What steps have been taken?" He straightened immediately. "The 2 officers have been removed from duty until further investigation. Internal Affairs is reviewing the video. We are preparing an official report." "Good," Marcia replied. "Make sure the investigation is fair and transparent. No hidden documents. No quiet settlements. We do this right." Her calm authority filled the room. The deputy nodded hard. "Yes, Chief, I understand." The video goes viral. Meanwhile, outside the station, the video kept spreading like wildfire. Within hours, it reached thousands of people. By midnight, it was everywhere. Social media, local news, neighborhood groups. People were shocked. Some were angry. Some were embarrassed for the department. But most were inspired by how Marcia handled the situation. Comments poured in. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She stood like a true leader. This is the kind of chief we need. Didn't abuse power even when she had it. Even people who had lost trust in police felt a spark of hope inside her. Office Marcia finally entered the chief's office for the first time. It was large, quiet, and filled with files, medals, and history. But at that moment, she didn't feel excited. She felt the weight of responsibility more than ever. She placed her badge on the desk and stared at it. This badge means trust. Tonight showed how easily that trust can be broken. She knew her first day as chief would be remembered not because of a ceremony or a meeting, but because of a lesson the entire city witnessed. The officer's actions were wrong, but how she responded, that would shape the future. She stood by the window, looking at the city lights, and whispered, "This is not revenge. This is the start of change." The next morning, sunlight filled the city, but inside the police department, the air felt heavy and uncertain. Officers walked quietly through the halls, glancing at each other with worry. The incident from last night had shaken everyone. Respect was being questioned. Trust was being tested. And the new chief, the woman they had underestimated, was now the center of every conversation. Marcia stepped into the building with steady steps. She was calm, but her presence carried a new weight. Officers moved aside as she walked past. Some nodded respectfully, others stayed silent out of guilt or fear, but Marcia's eyes held no anger. Only purposed, she entered the conference room where senior officers were waiting. Papers lay on the table, screens showed the news reports, and everyone looked tense. "Good morning," she said. Her voice alone changed the room's atmosphere. The deputy commissioner cleared his throat. "Chief, the entire city is reacting. Many people are angry. Some are demanding answers. We need your guidance." Marcia looked around the room, making eye contact with each person. "This is not a problem," she said. "This is an opportunity." The officers exchanged confused looks. Marcia continued. "The incident was wrong. It hurt the image of this department. But it also showed something important. People want change. They want fairness. They want officers they can trust." She paused, letting her words sink in. so we will give them exactly that. A new beginning within hours, Marcia called every officer, old and new, to the main hall. The large room was packed. Some stood stiffly, others looked down in shame. Many waited nervously to hear what the new chief would say. Marcia stepped up to the microphone. "Last night," she began, "2 officers hurt me. But the real damage was not to my body. The real damage was done to the trust between police and the people." The room stayed silent. "I want you all to understand one thing," she continued. "If this can happen to me, a fellow officer, imagine how often it happens to people who have no power, no badge, and no voice." Those words hit deep. She looked across the crowd and said, "This department will not continue the old way. From today we start a new chapter." And then she laid out her plan. Her reforms: 1. Mandatory respect, training every officer, no matter their rank, would go through training on communication, fairness, and dealing with civilians respectfully. 2. Body camera rules. Body cameras must stay on at all times. No excuses, no exceptions. 3. Weekly community meetings. Officers would meet with neighborhoods, talk with residents, and rebuild trust, step by step. Point 4. Zero tolerance for abuse, any. Officer who mistreated someone physically or verbally would face strict action. The room buzzed with quiet shock. Some officers nodded, some looked uncomfortable. But everyone understood one thing: the new chief was not here to sit in an office. She was here to change the system. The officers who hurt her later that afternoon, Marcia met with the internal affairs team. The 2 officers who assaulted her were waiting outside the room. Their eyes were full of regret and fear. When Marcia walked in, both men stood up quickly. "Chief, we're ready for whatever punishment you decide," the taller officer said softly. Marcia looked at them with the same calm strength she had shown the night before. "This is not about revenge," she said. "This is about learning." They looked surprised. "You will not lose your jobs," she continued, "but you will face suspension, training, evaluation, and a complete behavior review. If you fail these, then you have no place here." The officers nodded, relief mixed with shame. "Change starts with accountability," Marcia said, "and you will be the example." A message for the city by evening. Marcia stood on the steps of the police headquarters, facing reporters, cameras, and a crowd of citizens. She spoke clearly. "I am not just the new chief. I am a servant of this community. What happened to me should never happen to anyone. And under my leadership it won't." The crowd applauded. Some cheered. Some cried. Marcia looked out at them and said, "Respect is not about power. Respect is about humanity." Those words echoed through the city. That night, people didn't just see a chief. They saw a leader, a protector, a symbol of hope. And from that day forward, real change truly began.